It was late, the studio lights hummed, and the tape machine rolled in endless circles. Barry Gibb sat alone, his hand frozen on the fader, his voice echoing through the empty room. He wasn't supposed to be the only one there. That night, there should have been 3 voices, Barry, Robin, and Morris, blending like they always did. But the microphone next to Barry stayed cold, because Robin Gibb refused to sing. And the song he walked away from? It would become one of the Bee Gees' most haunting ballads, a song that broke their silence, but nearly broke their bond forever. This is the story of the song Robin refused to sing, and the night Barry Gibb finished it alone. But before we get to that studio, we need to go back to where the silence began. In 1969, the Bee Gees were riding higher than ever. Hit after hit, Massachusetts, Words, To Love Somebody, had made them international stars. But behind the harmonies, something darker was building. 3 brothers who once sang in unison were now struggling to breathe in the same room. Robin, the fragile poet with that trembling vibrato, felt his voice was being buried under Barry's rising fame. Barry, the perfectionist, felt he was the only one keeping the band afloat, and Morris, he just wanted peace. The arguments weren't about music anymore. They were about control, respect, and identity. Robin wanted the Bee Gees to sound British, melodic, emotional. Barry wanted to move forward, slicker, bolder, cinematic. It was art versus ambition, and neither would bend. By the time they entered the studio to record their next album, the air between them was thick with tension. According to those who were there, even the sound engineers could feel it. 2 brothers standing on opposite sides of the glass, saying everything through the music, but nothing to each other. Then came that song. Barry had written the melody late one night, a slow, aching ballad about loyalty and love lost. It wasn't just a love song. It was a confession, a plea for unity, perhaps even a message to Robin himself. When he played it to the group, Morris nodded quietly. Robin listened, then shook his head. He didn't like the lyrics. He didn't like the key. But what truly cut deep was this. Barry had already recorded the lead vocal, and for Robin, that felt like betrayal. "He didn't even ask me," Robin once said in an interview years later, his voice calm but sharp. He just sang it, and suddenly, it was his song. Barry tried to explain it wasn't personal. He said it was just the sound the song needed, but to Robin, every note felt like a door closing. The brothers argued until dawn. Morris begged them to calm down, reminding them of everything they'd built together, the dreams they chased as kids in Manchester, singing in cold clubs where no one listened. But fame had changed them. The crowds had grown, and so had the shadows between them. When the band reconvened to record the harmony parts, Robin stayed silent. He stood by the mic, headphones around his neck, staring at Barry on the other side of the glass. The engineer pressed record. The music began. Robin didn't sing a word. After a long minute, he set down his headphones and walked out of the studio. The door clicked shut behind him, a sound so soft it barely registered on the tape. But for Barry, it felt like thunder. Hours later, Barry sat alone where Robin had stood. He rewound the tape and listened again, to the empty space where his brother's voice should have been. Then, without a word, he hit record and finished the song himself. When the final chord faded, Barry lowered his head, whispering to no one. This was supposed to be ours, and that's when the realization sank in. The Bee Gees might still have their music, but they were about to lose each other, because what happened after that night would tear the band apart and change their story forever. When Robin walked out of that studio, he didn't just leave behind a song, he left behind a brotherhood. And Barry knew, in that moment, nothing about their music would ever be the same again. The song in question was Run to Me, a soaring ballad meant to heal wounds, but instead, it exposed them. It was 1972, and the Bee Gees were desperate to recover their sound, their fame, and their unity. Their last albums had struggled. The critics called them lost. The press called them yesterday's news. And for the first time in their lives, the Gibb brothers were doubting the one thing that had always saved them, their harmony. But Run to Me was supposed to fix that, a song about forgiveness, about being there when no one else is, written by Barry, Robin, and Morris together. At least, that's what the credits said. But behind closed doors, everyone knew the truth. Barry had already finished it before Robin ever stepped into the room. For Robin, it wasn't about credit, it was about heart. He once said, "I can't sing a song I don't believe in." And to him, Run to Me didn't feel honest, not when he could barely look Barry in the eye. He wanted to write songs that hurt, songs that bled with meaning. Barry wanted to write songs that soared, and the two visions clashed like thunder every time they stepped into the studio. That week, Morris tried everything to bring them together. He rewrote harmonies, rearranged verses, even told jokes between takes. But the silence between his brothers was too loud. They weren't talking about music anymore, they were talking about trust. In one session, Robin sat in the control booth while Barry sang take after take of Run to Me. Every line came out perfect, effortless, that golden falsetto, that emotion only Barry could summon, and yet every note seemed to drive Robin further away. He finally muttered to the engineer, "That's not the Bee Gees, that's just Barry." When he left, Morris followed him into the hallway. Witnesses said the two brothers argued quietly, not shouting, just wounded. Morris told him, "Rob, it's still our song." Robin replied, "Then why do I feel like I'm not in it?" That night, he didn't return. The next morning, Barry came early, before anyone else. He sat by the piano, replaying the opening chords over and over. The melody filled the room, but so did something else, guilt. In a later interview, Barry admitted, "There was so much ego in those years. We were young and we didn't know how to talk to each other. I think Robin felt like he was disappearing, and he wasn't wrong." For Robin, every note Barry sang was a reminder of the brother who used to need him and now didn't. And for Barry, every silence from Robin was a reminder of how fragile their bond really was. When Run to Me was finally released, it became a hit. The harmonies were perfect. Barry on lead, Robin joining only in the chorus, his voice distant but unmistakable. To fans, it was beautiful. To the brothers, it was painful. Robin refused to attend the first playback session. Morris said later, he couldn't listen to it. He said it felt like losing something he couldn't get back. But the world heard none of that. All they heard was another Bee Gees masterpiece, unaware that one of the brothers had almost walked away for good. For months, Robin kept his distance. He spent his days writing alone, while Barry and Morris moved on to new projects, but Barry couldn't escape the feeling that he'd crossed a line. He later confessed, "I didn't mean to take that song from him. I thought I was saving it, but maybe I was saving myself." Run to Me climbed the charts, earning praise for its angelic harmony, the same harmony that had been forged out of heartbreak. And Robin, he didn't sing it live for years. Even when they toured again, he'd step back from the microphone whenever that song began. He once told a friend, "That song isn't about running to someone, it's about someone walking away." By the end of that year, something in the Bee Gees quietly shifted. They had survived fame, success, and even their first breakup in 1969, but Run to Me had left a scar, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful songs are born from the most painful silences. But the story wasn't over, because years later, Barry would find himself back in that same studio, facing another loss, and another song Robin couldn't sing. Only this time, it wasn't pride that stopped him, it was something far deeper. Time has a strange way of circling back. For years, Run to Me stayed buried between them, a song both of them loved but never spoke about. They went on to reinvent themselves again and again. The disco era came, and suddenly the Bee Gees were everywhere. Jive Talkin', Stayin' Alive, Night Fever. The brothers who once couldn't share a studio were now the kings of the dance floor. But behind the flashing lights and gold records, there was still that same quiet divide. Barry, now the confident frontman, Robin, the emotional heart, Morris, the peacemaker holding it all together. They'd made peace, or at least the kind that allows the music to go on. But even then, the ghost of Run to Me lingered. Because deep down, both Barry and Robin knew that one day they'd have to face the same moment again, a moment when one would have to finish what the other could not. In 2011, that moment came. Robin Gibb, thin, pale, and tired, was back in the studio. He was working on Titanic Requiem, a classical project written with his son, RJ. It was haunting, orchestral, and filled with emotion, the kind of music Robin had always dreamed of making. But his voice was fading. He was battling illness, though he rarely admitted it publicly. Even as his body weakened, he refused to stop writing. Every day, he'd sit with Barry, talking about the past, the songs they wrote, the ones they never finished, and the ones that still haunted them. Among them was a melody Robin had started years earlier. It didn't have a title, just a few lines, recorded on an old tape, his voice fragile, almost breaking, whispering the words, "Don't cry alone." Barry found the tape one afternoon, tucked in a box of demos. He played it once, then again, and when he heard Robin's voice tremble through those words, He knew this was the song they were meant to finish, but by then, Robin was too weak to sing. He told Barry, softly, "You finish it for me." Barry hesitated. He remembered that night decades ago, the night Robin refused to sing "Run to Me," and he'd taken over the microphone instead. Only this time, it wasn't pride, it was goodbye, he said later. I could feel him fading. It was like watching part of myself disappear. And so, Barry did what he'd always done. He went to the studio, turned down the lights and sang, not to an audience, but to his brother. Every note of "Don't Cry Alone" carried the weight of 40 years, the fights, the laughter, the songs that defined their lives. Barry's voice cracked in places, but he didn't stop. He couldn't, because he knew this wasn't just another recording session. It was the last one they'd share, even if Robin wasn't in the room. Morris was gone by then. Robin was slipping away, and Barry was left with an empty chair beside him, the same chair Robin had once walked away from decades earlier. History had repeated itself, but this time it hurt far more. When the song was finished, Barry listened back in silence. He later said, "I didn't cry when I sang it. I cried after, because I knew he'd never sing again." The song was released in 2012, with Robin's original voice layered faintly behind Barry's, ghost-like, soft, eternal. It was their final duet, separated by time but united in sound. When Robin passed away shortly after, Barry couldn't bring himself to listen to the song for months. He said, "It's too much. It's like he's still there, waiting to come in." At Robin's memorial, Barry performed alone. The same man who once swore he'd never sing without his brothers now stood on stage, his hands trembling around the microphone. He didn't choose one of their hits. He chose "How Deep Is Your Love," because it was the last song they'd sung together as equals. When the music began, Barry looked up and whispered, "This is for you, Rob." And as his voice filled the hall, something strange happened. The audience swore they could still hear Robin's harmony, faint and distant, like a memory that refused to fade. That night, when Barry went home, he sat in the dark and played "Don't Cry Alone" one last time. He later said, "It felt like the end of the Bee Gees, but it also felt like the beginning of something I can't explain, maybe peace." For years, fans would replay that recording, hearing not just a song but a conversation between brothers, a conversation that started with silence and ended with love. But even then, Barry wasn't done, because before Robin's passing, he had made him a promise, one that would test him more than any song ever had. When the lights faded after Robin's funeral, Barry didn't go home right away. He lingered in the stillness, surrounded by flowers, silence, and the faint scent of candle wax. The chapel was empty now, but in Barry's mind it was still filled with voices. Robin's laughter, Morris's quiet hum, the harmonies that had once ruled the world. He stood there, whispering, "Where did the years go?" For the first time, Barry wasn't the leader, or the perfectionist, or the last man standing. He was just a brother, one who had outlived his band, his partners, his family. He once said in an interview, "When you lose your brothers, you lose your mirrors. You can't see yourself the same way anymore." For months after the funeral, Barry shut himself away. The guitars stayed untouched. The piano gathered dust. He couldn't listen to their songs, not even "Run to Me." It wasn't just grief, it was guilt. Because somewhere deep inside, Barry still remembered that night in the studio, the night Robin refused to sing. He'd finished the song then, believing he was saving it. Now, decades later, he wondered if Robin had been right all along, if some songs are meant to stay unfinished. He told a friend, "I'd give every hit back just to argue with him one more time." But Robin had left him something, a message. Just before his passing, Robin's final words to Barry were simple, "Don't stop, Baz, not for me." Barry wrote those words on a scrap of paper and pinned it above his desk. He'd look at it every morning, but couldn't bring himself to act on it. Until one night, when he dreamed of the three of them standing on stage again, their microphones side by side. In the dream, Robin turned to him and said, "It's your turn now," and then he was gone. When Barry woke up, he knew what he had to do. He would sing again, not because he wanted to, but because he had promised. In 2013, Barry announced his first ever solo tour. It was called Mythology, not because of fame, but because the Bee Gees had become one. Every song, every lyric, every story now belonged to history, and Barry was its last storyteller. When he walked on stage for the first show, the audience stood in complete silence. Behind him were 3 microphone stands, one for each brother, and when the lights hit them, Barry's eyes filled with tears. He whispered into the mic, I sing for my brothers tonight. I'll never stop singing for them. Then he began the song that started it all, Run to Me. The audience didn't know the full story. They didn't know this was the song Robin once refused to sing. They didn't know that Barry was reliving that moment all over again, only this time he sang both parts. He took his time. Each note lingered longer than before, every lyric drenched in memory. Whenever you're lonely, his voice cracked slightly. Run to me. And though the second microphone stood empty, Barry swore he could hear Robin's harmony, faint but present, like an echo from another life. He later said, "Sometimes I feel him in the reverb. It's like he never left the studio." After that tour, something in Barry softened. He began visiting old haunts, the homes they grew up in, the clubs they once played for 50 people. In one visit to Manchester, he said this is where it started. 3 brothers, 1 dream, and no idea what it would cost. When fans asked if he'd ever stop performing, Barry shook his head. "You can't stop what's inside you, and Robin's still inside me, in every word, every melody." He returned to the studio, slowly at first, but this time he wasn't chasing hits or perfection, he was chasing peace. In 2016, Barry released In the Now, his first full album without Robin or Morris. He wrote every lyric himself, some tender, some haunted. The songs carried the weight of time, reflections on love, loss, and aging. But one track stood out, hidden near the end, a quiet piano ballad, a reprise of Don't Cry Alone, except this time, Barry whispered the final line differently. He sang, "I won't cry alone, not while you're still with me." To those who knew the story, it wasn't just a lyric, it was Robin's message, sent back through Barry's voice, a promise fulfilled. And yet, even after all that healing, one moment still defined him. In 2017, Barry performed at Glastonbury, one of the world's biggest stages. As he stood before hundreds of thousands, the crowd began to chant, "Bee Gees, Bee Gees, Bee Gees." Barry looked down, visibly emotional, and said softly, "They're not here anymore, but I am because of them." Then he began to play To Love Somebody. As he sang, the sun broke through the clouds. Fans later said it felt like the heavens opened, like Morris and Robin were there, watching, listening. When the song ended, Barry raised his hand toward the sky and whispered, "This one's for you, boys." In later years, Barry reflected on his journey in interviews. He said, "I used to think surviving was a curse, but now I see it's a gift, a chance to keep their voices alive." He admitted there were nights he'd still dream of them, the 3 brothers laughing in the studio, arguing over lyrics, finishing each other's sentences. In those dreams they were whole again, and every time Barry woke, he'd smile and whisper, "See you in the next song." So when fans today ask him which song means the most, Barry doesn't hesitate. "It's Run to Me," he says quietly, "because that was the one we almost lost each other over, and now it's the one that keeps us together." When he performs it now, he sometimes turns to the empty microphone and whispers, "Your turn, Rob." And though there's no reply, he smiles, because he already knows the harmony by heart. The song Robin refused to sing was never just a story about music. It was about love, pride, forgiveness, and the kind of bond that even silence can't break. Barry didn't just finish Robin's song, he finished their story, the only way he knew how, by singing through the pain and turning loss into legacy. Because when the music fades and the lights go out, the melody lingers, soft, eternal, and filled with the voices of brothers who once promised each other, no matter what happens, don't cry alone. This is RetroWaves, where legends never really leave, they just keep singing somewhere between memory and eternity. If this story moved you, subscribe and keep the harmony alive.